Thank you Robertson Cruz Ramirez, hope I pronounced that right, for suggesting today's episode of Crappy Arguments. One of the most ignorant narratives spoken by the mainstream prequel-hating idiots that reflect how far up they are with their egos is the George Lucas was surrounded by yes-men narrative. Not only is this disputable with the most basic use of common sense and research, but it's also a very ironic argument. Let's talk about it and you'll see what I mean. First, looking through the narrative itself, there were never any specifics given. When Plinkett said that George probably got rid of those who questioned him a long time ago, without checking to see if he was in any way correct, I don't recall him specifying who the yes men were or how they were yes men. I don't hear a lot of specifics ever. Like, let's take Rick McCallum for example. What did he do and how did that apply to him being a yes man? Of course, given these people have done zero research, it's easily dismissible as a narrative with an anti-Lucas agenda. Being a producer doesn't make you a yes man. I'd be surprised if RedLetterMedia had any actual idea what a producer is. A producer, according to Wikipedia, is someone who funds and manages the movie. Rick McCallum, from what my research said, was the best kind of producer, as he wasn't a hindering nuisance like, say, the producers on Spider-Man 3. Rick McCallum, instead of bumping in and forcing George to change things or argued with him until he got his way, booked filming sessions and everything he was supposed to do. I watched the making of The Phantom Menace, and I couldn't even find anything that indicated anything approaching the yes man argument. Like, I couldn't find any overt arguments to begin with, but watching the behind the scenes documentary of The Phantom Menace alone told me that those trash talking about George Lucas and the yes men have never looked into the behind the scenes production. It's just shit they made up on the spot. The vibe I got from the behind the scenes documentary is that everyone looked to George as a leader, given he was the main guy behind the movie. The documentary goes into how they were filming in Tunisia, there was a storm, and a bunch of stuff got destroyed, and George didn't give in or lose interest after that. He persisted on, got the equipment restored or replaced, and bada boom, they're back to shooting the movie. Like, seriously, I've not seen a single bit of evidence that supports the yes man argument, aside from RedLetterMedia said so, which isn't evidence at all. I wasn't even sure what to dispute. It's such a weak, pathetically lazy, unsupported argument, and it tells me that people just believed it because they wanted to, and not because there was any evidence for it. From what I've seen, this comes from out-of-context clips, and the idea that George Lucas was held back when it came to the original trilogy, which that's probably where the whole thing stems from. This idea that all of the bad stuff came from George Lucas, and that the external crew saved Star Wars in the edit, even though every movie is saved in the edit. All the edits that were made with George's supervision. This is basic knowledge. People mistake the rough cut for the version that definitely would have came out. But to be honest, the rough cut would have only been released if the entire team was lazy, or they believed the rough cut to be the best version available. So yeah, that's where the yes man myth stems from. It's an extension of an elaborate story that poses Star Wars' history in a way where they try to make George Lucas the villain at every turn. George Lucas was so bad at telling stories, so other people had to fix it. George was greedy, and that's why he merged the hell out of the movie, etc. There is no evidence to suggest George Lucas was surrounded by yes men. And on top of that, how it harmed the movie. Because you could look at this in two ways. You could phrase it as, George Lucas had a bunch of mindless yes men who never questioned him. Or, George Lucas and his team mutually agreed on where to take the movie. People who spread what is essentially an urban legend never stop to sit down and think about it. It's just George bad, he ruined Star Wars bullshit. Also, the people who spread the yes men narrative act like they wouldn't have done the same thing. I guarantee if RedLetterMedia, Cosmonaut Variety Hour and Chris Stuckman were all in the room with George Lucas instead of the supposed yes men, they would have been the very thing they swore to destroy. Cause face it guys, everyone up until that point worshipped George Lucas. Any Lucas bashing related to Star Wars fans happened after the release of The Phantom Menace, and it comes from the ignorant assumptions and myths made up through misconceptions and the Dunning-Kruger effect. Let me tell you something. Anyone who didn't like George Lucas prior to that would have been the science fiction fans who thought Star Wars was a mockery of science fiction, or the Fox executives who thought the movie would be a flop. Those were the Lucas haters that existed back when Star Wars was being made, and as you can tell, the hate for George there had more to do with what he created, and that kind of just shoots the yes men argument in the foot, because back then, everyone acknowledged that he made Star Wars, and he was the main guy, and he is the god of Star Wars. Discrediting George for his own work only pops up after The Phantom Menace, cause the OT purists didn't pay attention. There's that crappy argument debunked. I'm JJ Plagiarisms, and until next time, what are stories for mystery boxes?
We found you hiding, we found you lying, choking on the dirt and sand. Your former glories and all your stories, dragged and washed with eager hands. But oh, your city